welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy and in today's video I'm talking you through my favourite fantasy romance books of 2022. So as you all know, I am a huge fantasy romance reader and I've read a lot of fantasy romance books this year. I'm really desperate to tell you all about my favourite ones this year and the ones I think are worth reading. But before we do get on with the video today, a little word from today's sponsor. Huge thank you to Luisa for kindly working with me in today's video to showcase their beautiful jewellery pieces. Now, I have worked with Luisa quite a few times on this channel and their jewellery is second to none in my opinion. So I did pick out some gorgeous pieces from their website. I picked out these beautiful kind of rope hoops, gorgeous horn necklace and a rope ring as well. Now, Luisa are currently running an end of year holiday campaign and you can get 20% off their jewellery by using my link, thebookbell20, and by clicking the link in my description bar below. And if you want to pick up the same pieces I have in this video, this ring is the rope slim ring. These earrings are the Paris hoops and this necklace, the little horn, is called the Reagan necklace. So huge thank you to Luisa for working with me in today's video. If you want some discounted jewellery by the end of the year, the link is in the description bar below. Okay, so let's get on to my favourite fantasy romance books of 2022. I have been like really selective, guys, because I think like there's something about fantasy romance which there's a lot of hits and misses, let's just say that. And I have done the groundwork this year in terms of scouting out the best books of fantasy romance of that genre. And unfortunately, I have found the worst books of that genre as well. So I will not be recommending those books, but let's get on with the best. And the book to me that was just so perfect was Kingdom of the Feared by Kerri Maniscalco. This is the final book in the Kingdom of the Wicked series by Kerri Maniscalco. It is a YA crossover adult series. So the first book's definitely more on the YA side, Kingdom of the Wicked, and then book 2, Kingdom of the Curse, is definitely more adult, and then this is definitely adult. So just a warning, if you're going into this expecting a YA series, it definitely ages up. But this probably has my top spot of the best fantasy romance books I read this year. This obviously is the third book in the series, so I can't go into plot spoilers with this book, obviously. But if you've never heard this book series before, which I'm praying to God you have heard of it, please read this book series. But this features a historic Italian setting and features two sisters who are twins, Emilia and Vittoria. In the first book we learn that Emilia and Vittoria are witches, and when Emilia finds her twin sister Vittoria brutally murdered, she has to team up with one of the 7 princes of hell to unravel the mystery. And let's just say this mystery is a lot bigger than what we think of it in the first book. Like, this series does a really good job of like expanding the whole world and the whole mystery. And this book, oh my god, does it get absolutely crazy. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some bits in this book that for me a little bit maybe too far-fetched, but I am already invested. I'm already fully into this series, and this was the most perfect end to the series. And I think Kerri Maniscalco is also continuing this universe. So I am like honestly so hyped, so in love, so grateful that I found this series, because this is one of my favourite books of the year in the fantasy romance genre, but also of all my books of the year. So you will have seen me feature this in my best books of 2022 as well. Obsessed. Please read the series, you will not regret it. Now, my second fantasy romance favourite of 2022 was a bit of a surprise for me, because even though this book was one of my most anticipated books of the year, it took me a little while to read this. So I ended up reading this on holiday in June this year, but it is Twin Crowns by Katherine Webber and Katherine Doyle. Now, I adore both Katie Webber and Katherine Doyle's books in general. I've read both of their books and I absolutely adore both of them. So when I found out that they were co-writing a fantasy book together, I was already hyped. And it took me a while to read this book because for some reason my reading at the start of the year was not the best, and I didn't really read a lot of the books that I was the most excited about, which is a shame. I eventually read this, and what this book is so much more than a fantasy romance. This is just a brilliant fantasy book in general, but the romance is perfection, and I am obsessed with this series already. So this book features two sisters separated at birth, Rose and Wren. Now, Rose is essentially the princess of this kingdom. She grows up in a life of luxury, whilst Wren, on the other hand, has been brought up in exile. And though Wren knows that she has a sister called Rose who is the princess, Rose doesn't know she has a sister called Wren who is part of this exile group and living in the kind of wilds. So Wren is really raised as a witch, and there is a lot of like magic in this, and these two sisters end up kind of impersonating each other. It is very, very fun, and each sister has their own romance as well. So I really would recommend this if you want something like YA, something really fun, something like not super heavy on romance, like there's no kind of like steamy scenes in this. This is YA, but it's really swoon worthy and it's really addictive. So I think like if you're looking for something fun and romantic, but also a really interesting kind of sister dynamic, then you'll really, really love Twin Crowns. Also, this is the beautiful proof copy that was kindly sent to me from Electric Monkey Books, and it is one of the most like beautiful proofs I have seen. It's so, so stunning. Anyway, book 2, Cursed Crowns, is coming out next year, I believe. So I'm so hyped about that book. I cannot wait. But I really would urge you to read this book if you've not yet read it. I had a lot of fun reading it. I read it on holiday, as I said. That's why like some pages are like falling out, because I just don't look after my books. What can I say? But I absolutely adored this book, so I think you will too. Okay, so the next two books I want to recommend are part of the same series. One is a novella, the other is a full novel. So I talk about this author on my channel a lot. I'm not gonna lie, I talk about her all the time. Danielle Jensen, queen of romantasy or fantasy romance, whatever you want to call it. Queen of fantasy, honestly. Like, she has impressed me so much this year. She is now one of my favourite fantasy authors, and I will read whatever she puts out. So I read the novella Calm Before the Storm, which is kind of a sequel-ish novella to the Bridge Kingdom series, which I read last year. I won't go too much into what the Bridge Kingdom series is about. I think you should read it if you haven't already. I know a few of you have. Bridge Kingdom is a fantasy romance and features two warring countries, and the princess of one country has to marry the king or the prince of the other country, and she is sworn to hate him. She is basically trying to destroy him and destroy his country so that her country can take over it. But of course they fall in love and it's perfect. It is one that more angstier series, I would say. So that is why reading Calm Before the Storm, this novella, was lovely. Because even though there are some issues present in this novella, like you can tell things aren't all rosy, things aren't all great following the events of book 1 and 2 in the Bridge Kingdom series, but there are some lovely scenes between Aaron and Lara, our main characters. There's some steamy scenes as well, which I think really makes up for the lack of steamy scenes in book 2. I'm not going to say why because that's a spoiler, but Calm Before the Storm was the perfect novella. I read it so quickly and fell in love all over again. So the next book I want to talk about is The Inadequate Heir, which was #1 for me. So in my best of 2022 video, which hopefully you will have already seen, that went out a few weeks ago. Oh guys, this was my #1 book of the year. The year. Across all genres, okay? Because it is just that good. So read Danielle Jensen for this book alone. It is perfection, but this is a spin-off book in the same world as the Bridge Kingdom books, but it's kind of on a parallel timeline, and it features Lara's brother, who falls in love with a general of another warring nation that they're kind of enemies against. So it's another enemies to lovers, but I think this delivers the enemies to lovers on another scale. These two really, really, really hate each other, but they can't deny this attraction. They also don't know who each other is. And when all that comes out, it's quite dramatic. So I just found this book like unputdownable. I was hooked. I need the next book now because it ends on such a cliffhanger. Like, I was in the throes of this book. I was like obsessed. So this book definitely really impressed me, and as fantasy romance goes, like, this is the creme de la creme of fantasy romance. Please, please, read this series. The next book I really want to recommend is A Dance with the Fae Prince by Elise Kova. So Elise Kova writes really lovely fantasy romances, and this book is actually book 2 in the Married to Magic series. So book 1 was A Deal with the Elf Prince, which I personally really enjoyed. I thought it was really fun. It wasn't like the best book I've ever read, but I enjoyed it. Like, I thought it was romantic and easy to read and addictive. I think that book has divided a lot of booktube, and a lot of booktube slate that book, which I feel is a little bit unfair. But book 2, A Dance with the Fae Prince, is set in the same world but features the Fae instead of the elves. So this features a girl who basically has to marry this like lord, I guess. Like she doesn't have a lot to her name, so she marries this lord. And she is living like quite a nice life, but this lord is very mysterious. She is not allowed to look at him. Like, she's never seen him before. So they have to, like, when they're eating dinner, like kind of face away from each other and stuff, which is really, really weird. But it kind of sets up a great fantasy romance read. She later discovers that, of course, he is a Fae prince. He is Prince of the Fae. And her kind of upbringing has always been very anti-Fae. So enemies to lovers, of course, features quite prominently in this, and what we then get is such a larger world that is uncovered after she kind of discovers his identity, and she is brought to Midscape, I think the world is called, where she has to help him break a curse. I was just really impressed by the whole scope of the novel, because it kind of sets it out quite small and then ends up really broad, and you're in this like huge world with this very powerful curse that seems quite impossible to stop. I think if you're looking for something really fun, romantic, with the right amount of steam, like these aren't very spicy, which I think is often quite refreshing. Like, don't get me wrong, there are a few steamy scenes, but nothing kind of extreme. So I think it's just a really fun, lovely fantasy romance book, and I really would recommend this series. I have now read A Duel with the Vampire Lord, which is the 3rd book in the series, and I liked it, but I didn't love it, so I don't really want to recommend it in this video, just because personally I had a bit more of a difficult relationship with it. But the first 2 books I really got along with, and the 2nd book, of course, I read this year, so I am recommending it here. Okay, so kind of a similar setup where I loved the 2nd book but didn't love the 3rd book as much. I finished the Serpent and Dove series this year by Shelby Mahurin. So the book I'm recommending in this video is Blood and Honey, which is the 2nd book in the series that I read this year and actually adored. So the first book is obviously Serpent and Dove. I read Blood and Honey this year, and also Gods and Monsters, which is the final book in the series. Blood and Honey actually really surprised me, because I've been hearing a lot of people say this isn't a very good book, it's not the greatest 2nd book in the series. So I went into this with quite low expectations, but actually I was really hooked, I was really impressed. These are really big books, and I think that is their downfall. But I really would recommend this series, and I'm holding up Blood and Honey here because this definitely deserves a spot in my best fantasy romance books of 2022. I would love to have included the final book, Gods and Monsters. I gave that book 3 stars. I didn't adore it, but I didn't hate it. I have an issue with a certain trope that was used, and if you know the tropes that I hate, you will understand what trope was used, and I hope that's not a spoiler. I couldn't get my head around this trope, and I hate this trope, and it just put me off. So sadly, I don't want to recommend that book or include that book in my video today, but please read the series. Like, you might like that book better than I did, but for me, Blood and Honey was definitely up there as like one of my best fantasy romance books I read. I adored this. I love Lou, I love Reed, and if you don't know what the series is about, Serpent and Dove is such a good book, because it basically is a enemies to lovers series about a witch and a witch hunter who are forced to marry each other. Now, the witch hunter doesn't know that his wife Lou is a witch, and she really has to hide that from him. But what this series does really well is the fact that Reed, the love interest, is obviously like hates witches. Like, he hates witches, and he's been brought up in a culture where witches are deemed the devil, like they are the scourge of the earth, and he really thinks that. So him battling his like desire for a witch, which when he discovers, he is quite like repulsed. I think that's one of my favourite bits of the series, and it really makes it a true enemies to lovers series. So I really would recommend Serpent and Dove and Blood and Honey and Gods and Monsters. You might enjoy the final book better than me, but I think you should just read this series in general. And my final fantasy romance book of the year goes to House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J Maas. So Sarah J Maas is obviously the queen of romantic fantasy, or fantasy romance, or romantasy, whatever you want to call it. She, I feel, started the genre, and I know that's not true, but for me, she started my obsession with fantasy romance. And this is the second book in the House of Earth and Blood Crescent City series, and this book just is crazy. Like, I've spoken about this in my best of 2022 video, do give that a watch, but I had very mixed feelings about this book. But overall, like, it was very well written. I thought that the characters were amazing. The steam factor, like the romance, is like another level, like maybe too much, but another level. And the ending just blew me away. I would say that obviously this is urban fantasy, so if you want like more of an epic fantasy or a high fantasy, this isn't really your vibe. But I think most people have read this book series, and for me, nobody does fantasy romance better than Sarah J Maas. And let's just say the ending, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it opens us up to more fantasy romance goodness. Like, can we all imagine? Can we all imagine? Anyway, I'm not going to say any more because spoilers, but House of Sky and Breath had to enter into this video. I enjoyed it. It was a wild ride, what can I say? And I think the romance factor really like turned up a dial here, because like obviously we've got our main characters Bryce and Hunt, who, you know, there's lots of like sexual tension there, romantic tension there, but also interestingly we do have a kind of side romance with Bryce's brother Rune, and he kind of has his own little thing going on, let's just say that. And of course, Sarah J Maas had to feature in my favourite fantasy romance books of 2022. So guys, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed these recommendations, and also just a glimpse into the best fantasy romance that I read this year. 2023 though, I am going really big on fantasy romance. This is your warning here. If you want a lot more videos, then they are coming up. Please do let me know what you want to see. Like, is there anything specifically about fantasy romance that you really want to see? Like, maybe a specific video on enemies to lovers fantasy romance, or any particular tropes that you're really interested in? I would love to hear your opinions and thoughts in the comments below. So thank you again to Luisa for kindly sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in the description bar and use my code thebookbell20. You get 20% off their beautiful jewellery. They are running an end of year campaign, so you don't want to miss that. So do check them and their beautiful jewellery out below. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you very soon in my next video. Bye!